Greetings to baristas. Long time no see. I've been busier than a one-armed man at a poker game, but I'm back on camera today to inform you on the real story, theoretically and in reality, of the major intellectual trend of Western civilization today. And that is the so-called Austrian School of Economics, better known in the USA as the Chicago School after its US disciples Friedman and Greenspan, to which, as we were told by the Wicked Witch of the West, Maggie Thatcher, there is no alternative. It's the role model of wealth siphoning exploitation preferred by the global financial community. The successful operating mechanism of austerity, whereby the masses enjoy the fruits and blessings of capitalist prosperity by losing their jobs, tightening their belts, learning to live without medical care, electricity, water, or education, or clothes for their children, as opposed to unsuccessful, failed systems that don't work as intended. So, what is the Austrian School? Where did it come from, beside the same place that gave us mini-weenie sausages and Adolf Hitler? Most of you know that in economic talk it's now referred to as neoliberalism, the brainchild of theorist prophets Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, and Joseph Schumpeter, the Marx, Engels, and Lenin of neoliberalism. We're told that their theories were a cry against the tyranny of central planning, which reached its fruition in Joe Stalin's USSR. Yet, it's not freedom per se that truly motivates the neoliberal. That is, not freedom for everyone, but for a chosen few. The few with value, as measured by the market. The Austrian School is based on utilitarianism, and its founders, such as Karl Menger and William Stanley Jevons. In utilitarian thought, things do not have inherent rights or value in themselves. This includes not only nature, but objects in nature, those natural objects transformed by man, thus man's labor, and therefore man himself. Value exists only in the mind, and only the marketplace can provide the true measure of value. I'm sure you're immediately grasping the corollaries of this all down the line. You have no inherent rights or value outside the marketplace. Your needs and desires have value only as they are marketable. Hence, the market does not serve human needs so much as human needs serve the market. If the market cannot put a profitable price on them, the portfolio of your needs and wants are worthless. This includes your medical care, your food, clothing, and shelter, your education, once again. This means that there can be no such thing as human rights or equal rights under the law, rights being defined as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There is no inherent value in your work, except as the market gives it value, so the worker can't claim equality with the capitalist. Forget altogether the primacy of labor value. Democracy is thus a fool's game, or a facade, because it has no real basis, and is thus a dangerous delusion that will destroy the true source of value. It will destroy the people who do have real measurable value in favor of those who have only abstract value, that is, only natural rights or marginal utility, just because they happen to walk erect, have 5-digit hands, and the power of speech. These lesser humans are thus expendable to the advancement of market-based humanity. So most humans are to be subjected to as tyrannical an external force as God or the state could ever have imposed, and that only those privileged by the market are entitled to the full freedom, rights, and prerogatives of human status. As Karl Menger put it before any modern Austrian or Chicago neoliberal was born, it might appear deplorable to a lover of humanity that possessing capital or a piece of land provides a higher income than that of a laborer, but it's simply that the satisfaction of more important human needs depends on the capitalist and landowner than on the laborer. The more important one's market-based value, the more right he has. The less his market-based value, the less his rights in the social scheme separating us from the animal world. Well, all that tells us what the Austrian School is philosophically, but not why it came into being. True that it's based on 19th century interpreters of Adam Smith, but why did their theories find such fruitful ground in Vienna in the 20th, and take deep root there of all places, incubating to spread its spore over the globe like a post-apocalyptic fungus? Austria in the 1930s, or more particularly its leftover Habsburg aristocrats and Danubian bourgeoisie, was caught between enemy states, National Socialist Germany and its own government, which seemed about to fall to the Austrian workers' movement. Hitler's regime was essentially warmed-over Prussian militarism, tweaked by Nazi plebeian demagoguery, but behind its pseudo-radical rhetoric was the very real danger of Austria's eclipse into the German military-industrial complex and the destruction of Austria's role as middleman on the Danube. The Austrian Nazi Fifth Column had unsuccessfully tried overthrowing its native right-wing pro-Italian government by assassinating Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss in July 1934. Earlier that same year, in February, Dollfuss had ordered the Austrian militia to crush the socialist workers of Red Vienna, shelling the Socialist Party's public housing projects after the workers' attempted rising. This was the so-called Austrian Civil War. Maybe you can see here what became of the Karl-Marx-Hof after its bombardment by the Austrian army trying to smoke out armed workers and their weapons caches. If you connect the dots, you see a straight line between the armed destruction of Vienna's socialist worker housing, depicted here, and the devastation of the public sector of the entire Western world. This was the opening volley of the neoliberal class war begun in the streets of Vienna 80 years ago, the shot you're hearing around the world. So, the valuable people were trapped between the German military-industrial complex, led by their fellow Austrian, a plebeian underdog who hated Vienna's ruling class snobbery and sought to crush it at its source, and the native working class. Thus, the valuable people of Vienna needed a political economy and an accompanying dogma of property and state. They would protect their little niche from this marauding octopus by transcending state borders, by making these borders totally irrelevant, and emasculate the democratic demands of the masses without an overbearing state. In the end, of course, von Mises' Austria needed some state force. Remember this? As Friedman's Chile required Augusto Pinochet to enforce its market value. Of course, the major reason Austria fell so easily to Hitler's National Socialist state 4 years later was the very crushing of Austrian socialism and its militant workers, the only native force that could have offered real resistance to the Anschluss of 1938, and perhaps have stopped Hitler in his tracks and saved all of Europe from the state serfdom Hayek so feared. Whoops! There goes the tube line. Hello? Why, it's Joseph Schumpeter. Damn, what brings your faint and distant voice over my landline? Do what? You think we should celebrate the creative destruction of the regulating state begun at the Karl-Marx-Hof of Vienna 80 years ago. Why is that? Because all socialist statist regimes are parallel tyrannies, which is why Hitler and the Austrian socialists were really on the same side. Well, they didn't seem to know that, did they? That's because they were blinded by irrational politics and didn't see the inner logic of market value? So that means Hitler and Stalin were really on the same side too, and World War II was all a big misunderstanding, not over anything really important. And the labor Zionists were on the same side as Hitler because they were statist collectivists also. Hence their common marginal utility to true value is all the same thing. That's according to your rational economy of value. Well, I hear you, Joe, but maybe you can tell me how people like you and your colleagues can be so rational when you're up in your ivory tower think tanks, emitting your heavy economic theses before you push the handle and flush them down on us. But when you're out in the real world of flesh and blood humanity, with the real needs of real humans, you're so goddamn stupid.